Welcome to Honey from the Rock, a podcast devoted to Bible exposition. My father, Jack Christensen, preached expositionally for over 50 years, first as a missionary to Pakistan and later as a pastor in New England. His legacy lives on in me. He often began his sermons with the little expression, "And now, a little honey from the rock," taken from Psalm 81, verse 16. The psalmist wrote, "I would feed you with the finest of the wheat, and with honey from the rock I would satisfy you." Today, more than ever, we need to feed our souls on the words of God in the Bible. The crying need of the church is for God-centered, word-explaining messages. So now, my friends, a little honey from the rock. Journalist Leonard Pitts, writing in the Miami Herald about the September 11 terrorist attack destroying the Twin Towers in New York City, said, "When injustices rain down from the skies, people inevitably look up and wonder." He began his article by telling about the Sunday after the attack, when he and his wife joined many others at church. Their minister stood up and told them that he had come to a conclusion nobody wanted to hear. "It is possible," he said, "that God allowed the planes to be stolen and the people to die because he was helpless to stop it. Maybe he didn't have the power." Pitts writes that the audience was stunned into silence. Several left. This was no rhetorical ploy. The minister had no answers. He could not question God's goodness, so he openly questioned God's power. Nobel Prize-winning physicist Steven Weinberg wrote a book on the origin of the universe entitled The First 3 Minutes. He concludes that book by writing, "The more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless." Science indicates to Weinberg that the universe is hostile to humans and headed for a fiery death, taking all of us with it. Nothing we do can outlast our temporary life on this fragile globe. Life is pointless. My friends, the universe is not pointless, and God is not powerless. In Daniel 7, God explains his plan for human history. This remarkable chapter outlines in broad strokes God's plan for this universe, for human history. Daniel 7 teaches us, in times of turmoil, trust God's plan. James Russell Lowell once said, "I take great comfort in God. I think he is sometimes much amused at the human race. But on the whole, he loves us. He would never have let us get at the matchbox if he had not known that the framework of the universe is fireproof." Well, that is true, until God decides to ignite the universe in judgment. Meanwhile, we live in a world where evil reigns. On February 24, 2022, Vladimir Putin sent his armies across the border into Ukraine in an attempt to take over the country. 3 years later, the brutal war continues because of Putin's evil ambitions. In 2023, hordes of Hamas gunmen swarmed across Gaza's border into Israel, slaughtering babies, raping women, burning families alive, and kidnapping victims. The battle over Gaza continues today. John Lennox, in his book Against the Flow, observes that dictators like Hitler, Stalin, and Chairman Mao have used brute force to conquer and control people down through history. They've acted more like animals, like the animals Daniel will describe in this chapter, in their quest for power. What is worse is that God seems to do nothing. If God can prevent evil, why doesn't he? What is God's answer to such moral evil? Daniel gives us God's answer. This vision gives us God's three responses to that question. 1. There will be a judgment. 2. The Son of Man will come back. And 3. The saints will receive the kingdom of God. Daniel 7 parallels Daniel 2 and the image of Nebuchadnezzar. Both chapters outline the flow of human history and God's final solution to human sin and human evil. So here is the first principle of human history. The pride of power summarizes human history. The pride of power summarizes human history, verses 1 through 8 of Daniel 7. Look with me at Daniel chapter 7, verse 1. In the first year of King Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions in his mind as he lay on his bed. Then he wrote the dream down and related the following summary of it. The year was 553 B.C. Belshazzar had only recently been installed on the throne of Babylon by his father, Nabonidus, who reigned from Timah on the Arabian Peninsula. The co-regency would lead to the defeat of the Babylonian Empire by Cyrus only 14 years later. But notice that chapter 7 of Daniel fits chronologically between chapters 4 and 5. The events of chapter 5 take place after the two visions recorded in Daniel 7 and 8. Daniel arranged his book by themes. The first half dealt with history, and the second half dealt with prophecy. We begin the second half of the book of Daniel in chapter 7. And we continue reading in verses 2 and 3. Daniel said, I was looking in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. Daniel saw a vision, but the vision was to teach him about real events. The elements of the vision are symbolic of events in human history. The Great Sea is a symbol of the nations in turmoil. It is often used this way in Scripture. Out of this mass of teeming, struggling humanity rise four beasts, followed by a little horn rising out from among 10 horns on the head of the fourth beast. Here we have a summary of the flow of human history from Daniel's day until the coming of Christ. There are 5 kingdoms or empires that Daniel notes here, and then the kingdom of Christ arrives. The skeptics fuss and deny that Daniel could predict the future so accurately. They argue that these writings were put together much later after the events took place, because they are far too accurate to have been written before the events. But this argument simply will not hold water. There is not a shred of evidence that it was written, that these words were written later, that Daniel lived and wrote his book later. No, God revealed this forecast of the future in advance, because God controls the future of humanity. We can trust his plan for our future because he is a sovereign God. Look at the first kingdom, Babylon, in verse 4. The first was like a lion and had the wings of an eagle. I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. a human mind was also given to it. Winged lions were the national symbol of the king of Babylon. The Ishtar gate leading into the city was adorned with yellow winged lions on blue glazed brickwork. Sculptures of huge winged lions stood at the entrances of the many royal palaces. As Daniel watched, however, the winged lion was plucked and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. The lion was given the heart or mind of a man. Most likely this refers to the humiliation of Nebuchadnezzar, who was driven insane for 7 years until he submitted to God, and then he was restored to the throne of Babylon and ruled with wisdom for his remaining years. The second kingdom, or second beast, is Medo-Persia in verse 5. Daniel's picture language continues. And behold, another beast, a second one, resembling a bear, and it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And thus they said to it, Arise, devour much meat. So a huge bear replaced the lion, although there's no indication of struggle between the two. From God's perspective, these empires simply replace one another in the ongoing saga of human history. This bear is raised up on one side, indicating the alliance between Media and Persia that was quickly dominated by Persia, the stronger side. The bear had 3 ribs in its mouth and was told to devour much meat. The 3 ribs probably correspond to the 3 major conquests of this kingdom. The Lydian Empire, modern-day Turkey, fell in 546 BC. The Babylonian kingdom was conquered in 539 BC, and the Egyptian kingdom was conquered in 525 BC. The Persian Empire was much bigger and stronger, but less glorious than the Babylonian Empire, and so it fits the image of a bear quite well. It extended over a much greater territory, but was also much, much slower in movement. The Persian armies were huge and slow, defeating their enemies with massive power rather than quick attacks. The Persian Empire began in 545 BC and lasted 200 years until the time of Alexander the Great in 336 BC. So we have the third beast, or the third kingdom, Greece, in verse 6. After this I kept looking, and behold, another one, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. In other words, God's still in control. He gives dominion. And here we see a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. The leopard was very fast and accurately pictures the conquests of Alexander the Great. He conquered more territory faster than any other leader in human history. In 8 short years, the small, mobile Greek army conquered more than 11,000 miles of territory, from Greece to India to Egypt. The 4 heads predicted that the kingdom would be divided into 4 sub-empires. And this happened shortly after the death of Alexander the Great, when the kingdom was divided among 4 generals named Lysimachus, Cassander, Seleucus, and Ptolemy. And that leads us to the 4th kingdom, Rome, in verse 7. After this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrifying and extremely strong. And it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet, and it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. This beast was unlike any other. The primary characteristic of this beast was destructive power. Rome came slowly onto the world scene, but ruled by brute force more than any other empire. The Roman Empire was huge, stretching across southern Europe to the Middle East, across North Africa, and all the way up the European seaboard to England. Beginning after victory in the First Punic War in 241 BC, Rome grew in power for 4 centuries. Reaching its peak power between 100 and 150 AD, Rome gradually declined in power for centuries afterward. Rome was never defeated as an entire empire. She rotted from within. The city was sacked in the 400s AD, but the last Roman or Byzantine ruler was not defeated until 1453 AD by Muhammad II when he conquered Constantinople. This was clearly the greatest empire in human history for pure power and longevity. The fifth kingdom, the 10 horns, in verse 8. While I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. The final kingdom begins as a 10-nation confederacy, just like in chapter 2. The image ends with 10 toes, so here the beasts end with 10 horns. These horns rise out of the beast, making it a Western confederacy, and the horns represent leaders of nations who partner together to conquer the world. This final kingdom exists in 2 stages. The first stage is the 10-nation confederacy that is replaced by a single horn and 7 nations. 3 of the horns are pulled out by the roots. A single horn rules contemporaneously with the other 7, but also dominates the other 7. This little horn is filled with pride and boasts great things during the days of this final kingdom. I'll say much more about this final kingdom and the little horn next week because Daniel is also fascinated with this part of the vision. And God gives him additional revelation to explain the meaning of the little horn. But for now, I want you to notice that these are human kingdoms that rise and fall throughout human history. God pictures them like animals because empires are really animal-like in their lust for power. I'm sometimes asked where the United States of America fits into this prophetic picture. I'm not sure that America is a major player on the world stage at the end of this age. If I place the United States of America anywhere, it would be somewhere in this final confederacy of nations that is eventually judged by God. God predicted the flow of human history in advance. He not only knows what will take place, he sovereignly superintends what will take place. We can summarize all of human history with the words pride of power. That's human history in a nutshell. Human history is characterized by this urge for power and the pride that power brings. We see it over and over again in the leaders of our nations. Empires are like animals in their lust for power. Over and over again, a nation rises against nation and kingdom against kingdom, driven by the pride of power. As a young man, Karl Marx was consumed with rage and driven by the desire to overthrow the world powers. He wrote a poem that expressed his ambition. He writes, "Then I will wander godlike and victorious through the ruins of the world, and giving my words an active force, I will feel equal to the Creator." Do you see the lust for power? in Karl Marx? The pride of power summarizes human history. But secondly, God judges human history from his heavenly throne. God judges human history. Verses 9 through 12. Daniel continues describing his vision. I kept looking until thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His vesture was like white snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was ablaze with flames. Its wheels were a burning fire. A river of fire was flowing and coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands were attending him, and myriads upon myriads were standing before him. The court sat, and the books were opened. Then I kept looking because of the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain, and its body was destroyed and given to the burning fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but an extension of life was granted to them for an appointed period of time. C.S. Lewis wrote, if individuals live only 70 years, then a state or a nation or a civilization which may last for 1,000 years is more important than the individual. But if Christianity is true, then the individual is not only more important, but incomparably more important, for he is everlasting, and the life of a state or a civilization compared with his is only a moment. For this reason, Christianity stands against tyranny. Christians live for eternity. We win this world one person at a time, for people, not empires, are eternal in value. No nation is eternal in value, but you are. Every human being has eternal value, making the person more important than the state. We know that God will one day open the books and judge every nation and every individual by his perfect standard. God is absolutely just, and we can rest in his justice. We see in these verses a series of heavenly thrones being set up in God's courtroom. God the Father is pictured as the Ancient of Days, proving that he alone has lived throughout all of human history, and he alone can render judgments based on first-hand experience with all that humanity has done. His clothing is white as snow. His hair is like pure wool. God is untainted with sin. God is untarnished with partiality. God is unpolluted by pride. He can judge justly. There were many thrones set up, but one final throne is the supreme court for all of humanity. This throne is ablaze with fire, much like the vision of God from Ezekiel 1. A lava river flowed out from the throne, and literally millions of angels attended to him. The court sat for judgment. The books were opened. Now, this judgment is not the great white throne judgment of Revelation 20, for that occurs after Christ's reign of 1,000 years on earth. This judgment occurs before the kingdom of Christ is established on earth, as God judges the little horn and the empires of human pride, the nations of this world. We call it the judgment of the nations, and Jesus foretold it all in Matthew 25. And in verses 31 and 32 of Matthew 25, he foretold that when he returned and sat on his throne, all the nations will be gathered before him. I believe Revelation 19 and 20 describe this event. Listen to John's words in Revelation 19. And I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and wages war. And the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who performed the signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire which burns with brimstone. Then I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given to them. And I saw the souls of all those who had been beheaded because of their testimony of Jesus and because of the word of God, and those who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not received the mark on their forehead and on their hand. And they came to life and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. The little horn would be the beast of Revelation 19. He continues to blaspheme God right up until the moment of his destruction by fire. Daniel 7:12 is an intriguing verse, and I linger here for just a moment. Listen to Daniel 7:12. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but an extension of life was granted to them for an appointed time. The little horn clearly is defeated, and his power was taken away by God. But each of the other beasts were granted an extension of life for a period of time. What does that mean? I suggest to you that it is historical. The lion, the bear, the leopard, and the iron-toothed beast are the beasts in verse 12, in contrast with verse 11. Each of the world kingdoms, the beasts, while replaced by another world kingdom, lives on in the next world kingdom. Each kingdom continues to exist as part of the dominion of Gentile powers until the defeat of the last of the world powers. They were granted life in the next kingdom each time, but the final kingdom is not granted life in any new kingdom. It's over. When God finally defeats the powers of this world, there is no tomorrow. Judgment Day ends life for the kingdoms and the nations of Antichrist. All of this coincides with the coming of the Son of Man. Principle number 3, human history culminates in the kingdom of Christ. Verses 13 and 14 of Daniel 7. I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. A.J. Conyers described the time when he heard G. Gordon Liddy speak to a college audience in Missouri. Throughout the evening, this former White House aide, who had been only a short time earlier released from a prison sentence for his part in the famous Watergate episode, urged upon his audience the idea that only force, strength, ruthless use of violence, and an iron will could earn the respect of friends and foes in this, quote, real world which is in fact a very tough neighborhood, unquote. One of the faculty rose to timidly pose a question. But in our country, most people, after all, do base their ethics on, like, the teaching of Jesus. And this doesn't sound much like the teachings of Jesus. He sat down. Liddy glared a moment, took in a breath, and bellowed, "Yeah, and look what happened to Jesus." He flailed his arms outward, holding them as if on the crossbeam of a gibbet. "They crucified him." To Liddy, the case was closed. The audience reacted briefly, as if stunned or astonished, and then erupted with thunderous applause. After all, Liddy only said out loud what everyone else had already concluded. Christ was irrelevant. Jesus was a loser. Well, G. Gordon Liddy, meet your maker. Jesus is coming again, and not to hang on a tree. You want might? You want power? It's all here in the return of Christ. The New Testament writers quote verse 13 more often than any other verse from Daniel. Jesus commonly referred to himself as the Son of Man. This was his favorite self-expression. The Son of Man is the Messiah, Jesus Christ. The verse says that Daniel saw him coming in the clouds of heaven. Jesus did not come in the clouds of heaven when he came to this earth for the first time. He was born in a manger to a lowly peasant girl in the tiny village of Bethlehem because there was no room for him in the inn. He died on a Roman cross, humiliated and rejected by mankind. Yet Jesus told his disciples before he died on that cross, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. Matthew 24:30. Jesus was no loser. Daniel gives us a remarkable picture of this heavenly scene yet in our future. God the Son presents himself to God the Father and receives his kingdom from the Father. He is given the power to rule over this earth, and all the nations of this earth will serve him in his kingdom. This kingdom is only spiritually in existence now. We are part of this kingdom. But Christ receives the kingdom when he returns. The kingdom of Daniel 7 is connected directly to the return of Jesus Christ and is an earthly reign over the nations of this world. I believe that reign will last for 1,000 years and is the culmination of human history. Yet Christ's kingdom has no end. For the 1,000 years on earth will melt into the eternal kingdom in the new heavens and the new earth where Christ will reign forever. Years ago, the Long Falls Dam was to be built across the Dead River in western Maine. It became a political battle between the Central Maine Power Company and a legislator named Percival Baxter, who later became governor. Baxter lost, and the dam was to be built submerging the towns of Flagstaff, Bigelow, Dead River, and Carrying Place underwater, which they are today. The people in the town were to be relocated, and the towns totally submerged. During the time between the initial decision and the completion of the dam, the town, which had once been well kept, fell into disrepair. Why keep it up now? Explained one resident. Where there is no faith in the future, there is no work in the present. This, my friends, is the value of prophecy. We work hard now because we know that our work is not in vain. We believe in the future. Otherwise, why bother to work in the present? Now, friends, God is in control, and we have our future in his coming kingdom to this earth. That hope motivates us to serve him now, no matter how difficult our current circumstances. We can trust in him. My friends, in times of trouble, trust God's plan. Trust his plan. He lays it out for us. We can trust him. Some years ago, as the story goes, a group of scientists and botanists were exploring remote regions of the Alps in search of a new species of flower. One day they noticed through binoculars a flower of such rarity and beauty that its value to science was incalculable. But it lay deep in a ravine with cliffs on both sides. To get the flower, someone had to be lowered over the cliff on a rope. A curious young boy was watching nearby, and the scientists told him they would pay him well if he agreed to be lowered over the cliff to retrieve the flower below. The boy took one long look at the steep, dizzy depths and said, "I'll be back in a minute." A short time later he returned, followed by a gray-haired man. Approaching the botanist, the boy said, "I'll go over that cliff and get that flower for you if this man holds the rope. He's my dad." Friends, as we survey this panorama of human history, remember, God's holding the rope. You can do whatever is asked of you in confidence because God, our Heavenly Father, is holding the rope.